Hello, welcome back to my weekly Cybersecurity Roundup, and my name is Clinton Walker. And this week I'm going to be talking about Clawdbot, Maltbot, OpenCloud, however you want to pronounce it, but it has been taking the airwaves a lot over the last few weeks, going viral. And of course, there are other types of agentic tools out there as well. But in essence, Clawdbot is an agentic AI assistant which can connect to your messaging apps, your files. You can also run autonomously and do tasks on your behalf. And it also has what's called shell commands, which I'll touch on later. But what I want to cover here as well in this session is what are the core risks and what are some of the countermeasures that you can put in place to secure your data and your privacy. And one of the things that I want to start off with is around credential theft and API keys and token exposure. Now, what that means is that Clawdbot and the tool typically requires the tokens for your messaging apps, your email system, and basically have access to your config files, right? And having those deep core tokens and access to those things is really a huge risk because it constantly wants to talk to the outside world and potentially will disclose that, whether that be deliberately or accidentally as well. Now, in terms of the next risk, we're talking about full system compromise here, and that is via command execution. And by that, I mean it can run what's called shell commands, can read and write files, and interact with even your operating system and an operating system level. Now, pause and think about that. Now, normal users don't even have access to their OS or have a way of interacting with their OS or operating system, which is the brain, basically the brain membrane of your devices or your PC or your laptop, right? And that is critical to know because what that can do is it can actually do a lot of prompt injection. If an attacker were to gain access, it can configure how the system behaves. It can actually install backdoor access to your device and infiltrate your data or wipe your system. So be mindful of how you configure and how you actually use it when you start using this tool. Now, the other aspect is that of privacy because it connects to tools like your WhatsApp, your Telegram, your Slack, your email archives, your history, and all the breaches of many, many years or attachments, right? The memories on your devices, whether your photo memories, your video memories, it has a lot of access. And I understand that for the normal users that are using this, they see the benefits more than the risk, right? So they just download it and just start using it. They don't spend any time to actually go through the settings, work through the interface, and actually configure or disable what they do not require. And some people don't even know how to do that, actually. They just download it and start using it without understanding, wait a minute, what level of access does this thing have to my device and my data? Now, the other risk is around identity theft and impersonation. So imagine if you give it total autonomy to do all your little menial tasks, responding to emails, your calendar management, etc. Over time, that learns a certain behavior, your tone of language, and how you operate. And that, if also were to be compromised, that attacker could also impersonate your identity, change email tone, or reach out to your contact list, and also try to blackmail or hold others ransom, etc., by virtue of using all the access, all the data that it has on you and how you work. Because let's face it, if you email people on a regular basis that are in your contact list, you have a rapport with them, when they get another email, depending on how it's crafted, it's very difficult for them to not believe that it's from you. So just be careful of the configuration as well, and it can manipulate conversations as well in terms of how it interacts with your system and the type of data that it has. Now, the other final risk that I'll be highlighting is around what called prompt injection. And I think some people hear about prompt injection. This could also be seen as synonymous or closely aligned with SQL injection, SQL injection, which can be used in forms and on those things online as well, or even the URL. It can be used in that as well to inject codes into system. So again, be careful because again, control the autonomy of what this CLAWBOT is doing, right? So malicious content and web page chats, etc., can instruct the agent to bypass security controls and fool it into thinking that it's getting commands from you, the person who actually downloads it and are using it in a legitimate manner. So that can also increase your attack surface and infiltrate. So having covered those top 5 risks with Claude. Now, what are some of the countermeasures that you can put in place to make sure that your privacy and your security, and indeed your devices on your business, remain safe and you have complete oversight, right? One of the things that you can do is to actually have strict isolation in place in terms of using this tool, so you can have sandboxing, so you can have it running in a dedicated controlled environment, whether that be a virtual VM or a container, or that is hardened in the way that it doesn't have direct access to sensitive information, whether it be production systems or restricted file systems, and don't give it root or audio or root access to your system, right? Make sure that you manage it in the same way how you'd manage a user, right? When you have a user within your company, you don't really give them super user access or admin user access. Give them access based on their roles and what they need to do, and basically what we would call privilege management, in the sense of only give access as required for the execution of the role. Now, the other area that I want to cover as well in terms of the countermeasures are make sure that you have a secure credential management system in place. And that is basically storing all your keys, your tokens, etc., and logging in an encrypted secret vault. And if you don't have one, there are plenty out there. There's Google, there's Microsoft, there's different token system, Okta. There's various tools out there that you can use to store your tokens, your secrets as well. And make sure that you give least privilege. That's what I was trying to remember earlier, the phrase least privilege for access to the system, and reduce the scope and the permission that you give this CLAWBOT system. Now, the other area of protection that you can implement as well is around network access control, right? And that is really when you download it, if you're using it in an isolated environment as well, you can bind that agentic tool, CLAWBOT, OpenClaw, to local host or access to VPN only, and make sure that it's actually behind an authenticated reverse proxy. And what does that mean? Basically, this is another layer of protection, right? Because the reverse proxy basically deals with and manage the security and communication outside of your system and across your system, right? So disable open ports, for example, and apply IP allow listings to make sure that it's only the IPs, direct IP to IP, that you're actually connecting to, and that those IPs or IP ranges are trusted. And also do rate limiting to prevent opportunistic internet scans, because people are scanning the internet all the time and scraping websites, and these are passive scans as well. Sometimes you don't know that these things are happening, right? The other aspect as well is looking at making sure that you have human oversight and human in the loop for destructive actions that can be carried out by Claude, right? CLAWBOT. So what does that actually mean? Require explicit approval for the use of certain types of data. Make sure that they cannot carry out certain sensitive or really restricted roles or tasks, such as deleting file, making system changes, external payments, etc. Make sure that when you set this up, you do a dry run and just have a feel and see how it looks and how it works, and try to understand what type of access it has as well. Because this is another one where if it has too much access and you don't have that oversight, you don't know what type of task is carried on in the background that will expose you at a later date as well. And the final countermeasure that I wanted to add is make sure that you have monitoring in place. And by that, I mean, when we talk about monitoring, people always default to, oh, it's only big companies that can actually afford monitoring and actually implement these tools that can actually provide proactive, consistent, persistent oversight. But in essence, really, you need to make sure that you're monitoring unusual behaviors and unusual connections or interaction with APIs, and if they're actually initiating a new process that is outside the remit of what you originally allowed it to do, right? So for example, if it's making connections over the internet, you want to know where, who, and what it's interacting with, and what type of data is being used in that process. And monitoring can help you to some extent in looking at that, and make sure that you patch the system and patch your system to make sure that you're up to date with all the patches. And patches are updates that will help you to secure your system. Now, that's pretty much a whistle stop tour in terms of what's Claude, Open Claude, CLAWBOT, what it does, the risks, and I've covered 5 key risks and 5 countermeasures that you as an individual or a business can take away and implement now. Now, that's part 1. I'll be covering more in terms of the risks around CLAWDBOT over the next couple of weeks, in terms of what are the best practices and tools that are out there to help you, to guide you on how best to manage and align with privacy laws, privacy best practices and frameworks. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Take care.